Hello and welcome to another Writerly Witterings. My name's Michael Jex, I'm an author, and today I thought I would run through a few of the books that I've really enjoyed this year, and if you fancy getting them for yourself or for someone at Christmas, it'll probably make sense. Cheers! First off, I'm going to bring up a book you'll never have heard of by an author you'll never have heard of. Craig Lawrence. Now, I don't know him, but he is a friend of my brother's, and he's had an interesting life because he was an officer in the Gurkhas, and he's written a book, The Legacy, which is really quite an involved crime thriller based on some devious businessman in London, an assassin, and it is very exciting, really well done. There's some glitches. I think it's a self-published type of book, so things like it hasn't been edited as well as one could have hoped. So discrete, D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E instead of double E-T. Little things like that. You can get over it. It's a very good story, well written, good idea. So I can recommend that, The Legacy by Craig Lawrence. Then, a book by a friend of mine, Richard Foreman, The Coming Man of Historical Fiction, says Saul David, the historian. Brand of Brothers is a 3-book, only very short book, trilogy about Britain being on the brink of war, 1415, then Harfleur, and then finally Agincourt. Really nice, rollicking adventure type story. Great fun. You can pick it up because they're 3 shortish stories. You can put it down fairly quickly as well. So, good book to try out over Christmas and beyond. Here's a book by a bunch of authors I hadn't heard of before, Matthew Willis and J.A. Ironside. I have actually reviewed this earlier in the year on my blog, Writerly Witterings. If you haven't heard of it, this is all about the lead up to 1066. Not and all that, 1066 the real thing. So, it goes into some detail about the Saxon Kings, about the background to William, and it is superb, really, really well done. Nicely imagined, really well researched, very well written, thoroughly recommended. Great book. I couldn't possibly have a review of the best books of the year without mentioning Karen Maitland. Yes, she's a friend of mine. She's with Medieval Murderers with me, but I love the sense of place that she has. I love the superstitions that she brings out. Karen does a huge amount of research into witchcraft, superstitions and all sorts, and she is a very, very fantastic writer. This is a superb book, A Gathering of Ghosts. I can thoroughly recommend that, or any of her others if you haven't read them. A great one to start with if you haven't read her books before is A Company of Liars. That was the first book of hers that I read before I met her, and it was superb, still is. Retribution, The Centurions 3 by Anthony Riches. Any book by Tony Riches is worth picking up. They're all set in a Roman period. They tend to be set around the legions. Anthony has always been fascinated by military history. He studied it at university, and he is a superb writer. Thoroughly recommend this one. It's the latest. If you haven't read any of his other books, please go and get some of the earlier books as well. They are very, very good. This is a book that I picked up in a second-hand bookshop. I know you'll find that hard to believe. You think I just treat my books like this. This came from Pegu Club Library. No idea where that's from, but it's dated February 1950. It's A History of Oliver Cromwell by John Buchan, by that brilliant publisher Hodder and Stoughton. Everyone will have heard of the 39 Steps, I hope. John Buchan was a fabulous thriller writer, but he was also a mean and very capable historian and researcher. If you see that, it is the first time you'll find a book about Oliver Cromwell that's actually readable. A superb piece of work. Here's one I never thought I'd suggest that people should read. Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry gets more than enough publicity already. His publishers give him publicity. He turns up on the TV all the time. I have cordially disliked him because I felt that he's just getting overexposure, and I got fed up with watching QI because he was on it for so many hundreds of episodes. And when I was given this to review, I thought, oh really? Another book by him? And I hate to say it is wonderful. It's a reimagining, really, of the stories of all the heroes from Greek mythology. So if you don't know the story of the Minotaur, if you don't know the story of Oedipus, if you don't know the story of Medea, if you don't know the story of Jason, all of the stories are here, all of the best stories about Greek heroes in Greek mythology. It is easy to read, it is very well written in that it's simple language, it's easy to understand, you can comprehend it, and he makes the names easier too, so that where it's a little bit complicated because of Greek spelling, Greek pronunciation and so on, he makes it more straightforward. If you haven't read any of Stephen Fry's books, I can thoroughly recommend this. If you're interested in the Greek heroes, I can recommend this. If you're interested in the original creation myths of the Greeks, I can thoroughly recommend Mythos by him, because I'm going to buy it. So I've got to recommend it if I'm going to buy it as well, haven't I? Great book for the year. I've mentioned Karen Maitland. I have to mention Susanna Gregory as well. This is the 20th anniversary edition of her book, A Plague on Both Your Houses. The first book with Matthew Bartholomew in it. Susanna wrote this when she was working at Cambridge, and she saw some nefarious goings on and politicking amongst the different dons and professors, and she wanted to write about it, but she couldn't because she thought she'd get sued. So she thought, I know, I'll write it in a historical context. So this book is her reimagining of what was going on back in the 80s, I think, as she thought it would have happened back in the late 1340s, early 1350s. And I can thoroughly recommend this one and a number of the others, because there's a foreword by this brilliant author known as Michael Jex. So there you go, that's a plug for my name, even if I don't get paid for it. This year I've started researching a book set in the 1920s. Largely because I was given this earlier in the year. Pinkertons, the Great Detective. You know those scenes in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid when the two outlaws are peering over a cliff saying, "Who are those guys?" and a bunch of men riding in a posse after them. One of them was the Great Detective. This is just a fabulous read. If you remember the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book that was all about the miners in the States and how they were trying to set up their own unions, and Conan Doyle was not a particularly union orientated person, but he wrote a thrilling good story about how the miners were setting up the Molly Maguires, a vicious, violent bunch of murderers. Well, he may not have liked miners, but unions rather, but he got his facts right there. They were vicious, they were murdering evil people. Pinkertons were hired to try to get rid of them, and this is the story of the guy who was sent in as an agent to go in undercover, deep undercover, and find out who the Molly Maguires were and bring them to justice. And he did. But then he went on to help bring down people like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and a number of other outlaws in the time. Because outlaws in the States weren't particularly nice people. They were basically murderers. The James Gang and so on weren't heroic. They were just murderers. Pinkertons, and this is all about James McFarland, who helped bring down an awful lot of those agents. Thoroughly recommended. Written by a guy, Bo Riffenberg, who is a very, very good writer. You should look out for his books. And of course there's one last book I have to mention, because I haven't actually reviewed this, which is a bit gormless of me, but my book that came out earlier this year, Pilgrims War. This is all about the First Crusade and the sort of people who went on crusade at the time, because that was not a crusade where you had glorious knights going off with gleaming armour, with hundreds of thousands of men-at-arms all around them. This was the People's Crusade. This was the war where an awful lot of poverty-struck criminal types and others decided that they were going to go out because they were promised by the Pope that they would get a pardon for all their sins in heaven if they went and fought for Jesus in the Holy Land. So the Pope promoted this war. The poor pilgrims went off and they caused havoc across the whole of Europe, all the way to Constantinople, and then crossed over into the Holy Land, the survivors, and they didn't have a good time of it either. So this is the book of the first part of that. I really like it. It's had some fantastic reviews from different people, so I hope you'll like it too. If you haven't bought it already, get it for Christmas. Get two. Get one for yourself, give one to someone else. Brilliant Christmas present. And in case you haven't seen it as well, the other book that came out this year was A Missed Murder, which is the third in my Bloody Mary Tudor series. And this one again stars Jack Blackjack, the somewhat incompetent theoretical assassin who doesn't like the job of being an assassin, but he really likes the income. And so he subcontracts all his work. This is the story of the continuing adventures of Jack Blackjack, which is fun. Hopefully you'll like it too. And I've got to say, just a brief comment now, my perfect pencil I got last week has been used, and now the latest pencil is joining the array of two others that I've used before, and as you can see it's almost got worn out. So I'm going to be buying myself a new pencil or two for Christmas. That's my lot. I've still got some tea this time, thank goodness. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed that, do the normal things, put a comment down the bottom. Please do click on the like, and if you're interested then hit the subscribe button as well, because it's always good to know that people are actually interested in the things I'm filming. Otherwise I might just as well stop. There's other videos around here I think, so enjoy them as well, and I hope to see you soon. Take care, thanks very much.